let's talk about Natacha Neumann, the founder that I get to speak to today, who founded a popular children's food brand in Germany and is a strong advocate for healthy nutrition for children. So, Natacha comes from a business background. So, she graduated in business management from the London School of Economics back in 2009 and has done so many amazing things. But one of those is the founding of this popular children's food brand. And she recognized during this experience the importance of reorganization and the organizational structure and how it related to the cultural shift that we were seeing. And also how the future of work is not a buzzword, but, a necessary mindset. And we really talk deeply about her journey of discovering managing practices in this conversation, but she's also very honest about her personal journey as a leader, as a founder, and what that looks like. Since 2022, she has left the company and is now supporting other founders and entrepreneurs and their teams to do their personal development, change their mindset, look at the way they behave and their structures to not only benefit themselves, but also their companies and stakeholders. So this way of working is deeply ingrained in Natacha's approach to how she looks at businesses, but also the leader's journey as well. And that's what really shines through in this episode. So I think there's a lot we can learn from Natacha's experience and also the work that she's doing now. So without me delaying this episode any further, let's get started and get into it with Natacha. Hi, Natacha, and welcome to Make It Thrive.
Hi, Lizzie. I'm happy to be here today.
It's wonderful to have you. And I think the place where I really want to start this conversation is your journey to becoming a founder. So, would you kind of give us that story?
Where do I start? I think this journey starts probably when I was still at university. And we did an exercise at some point. It was during my master's. I studied London at LSE, and we did some offsite there. And they asked us to write our 10-year goals, yeah, which is something that nobody else that I talked to had ever done this and has never done this at university. But it's one of the most valuable things I did. And by the way, just maybe quick thing, I still do that. So I still sit down every year and redefine my 10-year goal and my 3-year goal and my 1-year goal. But anyway, so I was, for the first time in my life, I was defining 10-year goals. And I wrote there, I want to found a company. And then life carried on, and I finished my master's and got a job and moved around. I lived in a whole lot of different countries, and at some point I realized I no actually what happened is I got a promotion offered, and this didn't do anything to me emotionally at all. I wasn't excited by it. I wasn't even sure I wanted it. I actually realized I didn't want it. So that was for me the big realization. Well, what am I doing here if I get offered what everybody else is here for, basically to climb this ladder, and I don't really, doesn't really do anything to me. So the first step was for me to quit. And everybody thought I was crazy because I was, I was progressing well on this, career ladder as they call it. But I would just realize, okay, this is not what I want to do with my life. I didn't have the feeling I had an impact. For me, having an impact, being able to change the world and make the world a little bit of a better place is very important to me. And I had the feeling, okay, I'm just a pawn here, and I'm not really doing that. So I need to go off and realize that 10-year goal I had set down years before. So yeah, I spent a year and a half soul searching, really trying different things. I wrote different business plans. I did different courses, and just to get inspiration. I talked to a lot of people, and yeah, and I ended up one of the business plans, I think it was number 4 or 5, was for the company that I eventually founded. And yeah, that's it. And then I just founded. That was it.
And I suppose you sort of talk about that wanting to have that impact. Is that what kind of really drove that desire to found a company in your 10-year plan?
Yeah, and it's funny because also through the soul searching of, okay, I want to found a company, but what kind of company? That was my driving question. I want to have an impact, and what is the greatest impact I can have? And it's really ridiculous when I explain it now that it took me a year and a half to figure this out. But basically, I figured out in a year and a half that the greatest impact or the most important thing, that's how I started. If it, it's going to have a big important impact, it's going to be the most important thing. The most important thing is health. Yeah, without our health, we don't have anything. A lot of us learned that during the COVID years. The most important thing in health is nutrition, because if our nutrition, that was the single most biggest variable that affects our health. And the biggest impact on our nutrition is starting off with a good nutrition as a child, because later on in life it's super difficult to change that. And yeah, and that's what drove me to create a company that does healthy food for children. So, but it came from this process of like, well, I want to have a great, big, important impact, and yeah, basically defining what that was over a very long time. What seems now like a very long time for coming up with a very simple answer.
Gosh, and it's funny, isn't it? Because when you think about that impact kind of question, and when you think about all of the challenges, it is really overwhelming when you look at all of the challenges that are around us to kind of pick
Yeah.
one thing. So was there a moment where it kind of really you resonated most with health and was like, actually, this is really where I want to focus my attention? Because there's so many kind of avenues you could have gone down.
Yeah, I mean, it was through asking this question, what is the most important thing? And it obviously, I think, important thing will be different for every single person. It is also different as time goes by. So if I ask myself that question now, I would deliver a complete different answer. Um, healthy nutrition is no longer, I mean, it's still a very important part of my life, but it's not my biggest purpose anymore. So yeah, it was answering this question for me. What is the most important thing for me right now? And that's what took me to this, to answering, I guess, my purpose at the moment. Although I think a lot of people have this pressure of, if I define my purpose, it's going to be my life purpose, and I'm going to have to keep it forever and follow it forever. And I've
Yeah.
become a lot more relaxed with it. It was my purpose for the time, it was my impact for the time, and now I've entered a new phase, and that's okay.
Oh my gosh, that resonates with me so much, because it's really easy, isn't it, to get overwhelmed by having to come up with your big life's purpose. And
Yeah,
when people ask you that question, you think, I mean, yeah, like you say, we change and we grow and we evolve. So what my purpose was 10 years ago is going to be completely different for the next 10 years. And that there is so much of a rhetoric out there that we have to have this like one life's purpose. And it's like, well,
yeah.
actually, no, it's gonna evolve, it's gonna grow. And does that still drive very much your kind of work today, Natacha?
Yeah, and it's funny because we talked about setting those 10-year goals. So I have something I do which it's I call it a life pilot. Yeah. And what it does is I set my purpose. Yeah. It starts with a purpose statement. Yeah. Uh, what do I want to achieve in my life? And then I break it down to, in the next 10 years, or no, break it down by the end of my life, in 10 years, in 3 years, in 1 year, and break it down to this quarter. What do I need to do this quarter in order to be able to live this life that I want to achieve? Um, and it's right at the top there. My purpose is what drives basically the actions I take on a daily basis. And talking about it changing, yeah, I mean, there are phases where it's the same for years on end, and there are phases where I tweak it a lot. And it's okay because we change and we develop as people. So I think it's fine that our purpose does as well with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the company you founded, Natacha, so Erdbar Fresh Front, have I pronounced that correctly? I hope I have.
More or less.
Do you want to pronounce it for me?
Yeah, so the company's called Erdbar, and the brand name in Germany, Austria, Switzerland is Freche Freunde, which translates to like cheeky friends.
Oh, I love that so much. That is so cute. So tell us about the company, Natasha. So what, we know why you founded it. Tell us about the journey of getting it going.
So I found it with my husband. Yeah, I went on the soul searching journey for a year and a half, and then when the business plan was written, I told him, "Hey, look, this is this." He had worked in children nutrition. I was like, "This business plan is made for you. We need to do this together, and I want you to do this with me." So we've been working together for the last 14 years. So we founded this together. And it was just the two of us at the beginning. For almost 2 years, it was the two of us. And we developed the products, and there are all kinds of healthy snacks for kids with just vegetables and fruit, no added sugar, all organic, no nasties basically. And it was a journey of firstly developing the brand, the products, and then trying to get the product out there, which was the biggest challenge. So getting through to retail, gaining customers, and slowly growing. Yeah, slowly growing the business. And 2 years in, we got our first helper. So we started growing the team, and yeah, it was. I mean, I still sometimes pinch myself at how well everything went. We were just growing and growing and growing, and sometimes growing too fast for our own good. um, and yeah, sometimes just too much, working even too hard to even take a step back and realize how much we were enjoying the journey as well, and how much fun it was just because we were just doing so much. In the process, I also had 3 kids, so it was busy times. Exactly, and yeah, I basically just did a lot of the first years. Yeah, not really just taking a step back to see, okay, is there a better way of doing this, or what could be different? So I think that's often the problem um, entrepreneurs have when their companies are growing fast at the beginning. And I had it definitely just putting my head down and like digging and not putting the head up to see, okay, am I still digging in the right direction? So yeah, there were then moments in the later years which was a lot more looking up and seeing, okay, is this still going in the right direction? What do I want for this company? What do I fundamentally want to move and change in this world? So taking sometimes steps back over then the following years.
Mm. I know from our previous conversation that you started to implement some self-management. So
Yes.
how did that come about?
So the company was about 6, 7 years in. We were doing great. We were about 80 people. And I had basically structured this company as companies are structured, yeah, in hierarchy with departments and team leads and a management team. And I didn't know better. Yeah, that's the only experience I had had. And most management books, were saying this is the way it's done. And I'd been frustrated for a while, feeling like, I mean, there was different frustrations. One was the feeling that a lot of the things still ended up on my desk. So as soon as it was a big problem, basically, I was just solving other people's problems the whole day long, which is not necessarily the funnest thing to do. Yeah, just receiving problems. That was the first thing that was frustrating me. The second thing was we had developed a management team, and I had the feeling that there was no trust of the management team. There was a lot of, yeah, what happens between these closed doors and what's being decided, and how do we, I don't know. There was this space between the team and the management team, and it wasn't like one big team working together for a common goal, was my feeling. Um, I also had the feeling that we weren't truly living our values. So um, some of the values that we have were responsibility, were trust and respect, were flexibility. So some of these things we weren't living because of the structure we had, but I didn't know that. Yeah, I was just puzzled by why we're not able to live these values. Yeah, so those are the things that I think that originally then made me realize, okay, is there a better way? Is there something I can change? And I started reading different things and talking to different people, and it was Reinventing Organizations, the book Reinventing Organizations by Lalou that first blew my mind and made me realize, okay, wow, there is something else out there. So I carried on my search for answers, I guess. Carried on, talking to as many people as I could that had tried to implement self-organized teams or holacracy or sociocracy. I read, everything there is to read on the topic, and still not knowing a lot of the answers, I thought, okay, I don't know how we're going to do this, but this seems to be the only way actually to work. So I was converted basically. I was converted. So yeah, I told the team, hey, everybody, from today onwards, we're going to change completely the way we work. There's not going to be any hierarchy anymore. You don't have a boss anymore. You're taking responsibility for your roles. And let's go. Go do it. Which most people which have implemented a cultural change will know this was probably the stupidest thing one could do because everybody was very confused and had no idea what I was talking about. But that was basically the kickoff of it. Yeah, firstly, it was me being so convinced that this is what it needed, being convinced that the way we've told, and I've 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 got a business management undergraduate degree and 2 masters, and nobody ever told me that this is a form of organizational structure or of management or of culture. Yeah, this is not. I mean, hopefully they're teaching that at the universities nowadays, but back then they weren't. There was it was a realization, and a light went on, and there was no way of not not changing that, even though I didn't know what the way forward would be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very easy to be converted once you've read Reinventing Organizations. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's ever the same after they've read that book.
Yeah, but I get a lot of people when I tell them I've what we've done, that's saying, okay, it all sounds great, but can it really work? And it was very funny actually in a lot of these discussions I had before implementing it. I talked to a lot of people that had tried and failed, that had gone back to traditional structure because it wasn't successful. So there are a lot of, I mean, I heard a lot of horror stories, more horror stories than positive stories, unfortunately. It still didn't put me off because I was so convinced. Yeah. And one of the big ahas for me was realizing in that time that I founded because I wanted to have an impact, because I wanted to, I mean, I guess all the values that the company ended up having, yeah, because I wanted to take responsibility, because I wanted flexibility. All these values that were in the company were originally mine, yeah, they were originally everything that I wanted, and realizing, hey, actually, it's not just me. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants autonomy. Everybody wants to create, a difference in this world. Everybody wants to be, to give trust and be trusted. And that was for me such a realization because I felt like, okay, this is what I want, and let's see if this team can work together to deliver that. And that was, changing that perspective and saying, actually, no, it's not me that wants this. Everybody wants it. And how do I create an atmosphere and a space where everybody can have that rather than Natacha wants that and how do I make sure they're doing what I want?
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's very easy, isn't it, to become, as much as we have a very clear purpose in mind and it comes from a very authentic place of wanting to make an impact, it's really easy for us to default into that kind of like dictatorship, like we are going to do this. And then before we know it, we've kind of gone into that dictatorship role, even though we're trying to be more democratic.
Yeah, well, it becomes very quickly, our company, our baby, we have to succeed. Yeah, there's a certain part of ego that comes in there. And for me, in this phase of implementing self-organized teams, the first phase was working on myself because really starting this journey, I mean, telling the whole team, okay, we're going to change. I wanted it, but if I'm honest with myself, I wasn't prepared what I needed to do or who I needed to be in order to really implement that. So that was the first big need. Basically, I needed to let go of, I'm the one calling the shots and making decisions, and it's my baby, and it's what I want, and it's not what others want, and all these things that we carry with us, that unfortunately our education system and the way we grew up and society as a whole doesn't encourage anything else in us. But that's a whole different story. Don't get me going on that. But yeah, I had to let go of a lot of those things, or develop myself personally, in order to be able to really yeah, create the space for myself and for others.
Yeah. And in terms of, because when we talk about that a lot of the time in self-organized teams, it's a term we use at Semco called brave leadership. We need to work on that brave leadership before we go on this journey together, because it is about creating that space for people to step in, and for us to step back slightly.
Yeah.
And so for you, I mean, would you be comfortable sharing something that was kind of a big learning point for you and you're on that personal journey? Was there something that really kind of stood out for you on that personal journey?
I'm not sure if it was one thing. I think it was a series of different things. I mean, I think the most fundamental learning at the end of the day, um, and I'm not sure people really understanding what they just hear it or read it, because I know I read it and heard it a lot of times before I truly understood it. The most important thing is really taking responsibility for oneself. And a lot of the leaders, including myself, before, I wanted others to take responsibility, but I wasn't. Yeah, I wanted them to take responsibility for their job, but I wasn't taking responsibility for, and I'm not just saying what I was for my job. I was definitely doing that, but taking responsibility for yourself means also for your health, for your thoughts, for your feelings, for how you're doing, for your wants, for all these things. Um, and it's, as I say, it doesn't, it's something that's very easy to read and say, yeah, yeah, taking responsibility, that's all good, I've got it. But it goes deeper than that. It goes, I mean, it starts with, for me, it starts with firstly even understanding, what am I going through, what am I thinking, which most of us don't. Most of us go through life and don't even understand, well, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? Or yeah, it's becomes a second nature. And we don't even realize, okay, I've just had a negative thought about this guy that I feel is not doing his job, and I feel insecure here because I felt my decision was undermined, and whatever it might be. Yeah, it's happening every single moment, but we're not even aware of it. So the first important thing was, for me, in order to be able to take responsibility and change myself, was becoming aware of everything happening inside of, yeah, or all my emotions or my thoughts or my um, feelings. Yeah, because without knowing that, then otherwise it's not possible to act on them in a responsible way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah. No, that radical responsibility is what I often call it. It's like it's okay to take responsibility for the obvious things, but are we always taking that radical responsibility of like putting up the mirror to say, how am I responsible in some way for this
Mm.
situation, and holding that mirror up and having that consciousness. I I really can, with what you're saying, Natasha, as well, something that comes to mind is someone, and I get this a lot actually in conversations, is people will say to me, but what makes a leader want to do that personal work?
Mm.
Because, so many leaders are still stuck in that very rigid way of leadership, of performing, of playing a role, of being very inauthentic, of not doing the personal work. And what would you say to that, I suppose, Natasha? What do you kind of see the differences between those who are willing to do the deep and the personal work to go on this journey, and those who are, yeah, not yet there?
I mean, I think if you don't do the work, you're never going to be a great leader. Yeah, you're going to be a manager your whole life. Yeah, and in order to be a great leader, you can't lead others until you lead yourself. That for me is it goes fundamentally together. If you're not willing to be, to have this introspection and to be vulnerable and to be able to have the empathy for other people, you're gonna end up by just by being a manager. Which for some people, they'll be happy being a manager their whole life because they'll get the big paycheck and they'll have people saying, "Oh wow, you've got a big car and a big house and a big office." I'm not sure they'll ever be truly satisfied with that, but that's that's also a different story. I think from becoming a great leader is one of the most rewarding things that could happen. Yeah, it's amazing to see people truly blossom in front of your eyes, to be able to develop them, to be able to help them, become better versions of themselves. I don't think there's any more rewarding. It's not a job. I was going to say more rewarding job, but it's almost like a calling. And I use the word leader. For me, it's when you lead yourself, when you lead others, even without a position. There are some great leaders out there that aren't C-level, that don't even have responsibility for other people. They're great leaders, which are parents. Yeah, parents are also to a certain extent leaders for their children. So I use the word. For me, it has it's not this typical definition that you might find in the dictionary. It's anybody that inspires others to become better versions of themselves, and a leader. People want to follow a leader. They don't have to because they don't have to, and that's a big difference.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You said so many good things there where I was like, oh my gosh, that was so powerful. I need to write that down. That was so good, Natacha. I suppose we've spoken about your journey, but when you sort of announced this to the team, how did they feel? What was their initial reaction?
Yeah, so most of them were very confused. It was interesting to see some, I like to say everybody's on a different point of their personal development. And some of them were even further than me probably, and were like, "Hey, Natacha, about time." Yeah. So there were a few that got it, but most of them were just very, very confused. So it was in the early days of going in the direction of self management. There was a lot of confusion. Yeah, what does it mean? Well, a lot of fear as well. This is change, and a lot of people don't deal well with change. What will this mean for me, for my paycheck, for my role, for my job? So so it was very quickly clear that okay, we need to define some kind of operating system for us. So we started to change agent groups within the company so that we could really so that the team could define, okay, how can we live this? What do we need in order to really be able to, these are the principles, and how do we need to structure ourselves or to act in order to be able to live these principles? So we had that a lot at the beginning, and then at some point we realized, but still not enough. Yeah, we're still for many things going around in circles. So we made the decision to implement a lot of the processes of Holacracy. And I very often say we're a self-managed team. We're not a Holacracy. Yeah, although a lot of people would say, okay, but you're organized as a Holacracy. To 90% it's true. Yeah, as we saw there was so much chaos, we said, okay, let's implement everything from Holacracy, or at least most things. I don't think we implemented every 100%, but let's say at the time 95%. And then we'll see. And then basically we implemented everything, and then went through a process of, is this working for us? Is it not? Does it fit us or not? Is it serving a purpose? Or do we need to change it? And then it was a continuous trial and error process of seeing, but with a base that was already more helpful than developing everything from scratch, because we could have done that, but it would have taken a whole lot more energy. So, and we didn't, you have to see the setting. We were also, company growing very fast. There's a lot of day-to-day stuff. Plus, we're trying to develop a whole structure and operating system. So it was helpful in that time to take off a few things off the shelf, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's interesting when we look at the kind of the systems as well, because people often say to me, or there's an assumption that self-management is structureless, and I was like, no, we need even more structure to hold it all
Yeah.
together, because when we don't have things like managers and bosses telling us what to do, and we want to have that greater autonomy, it's actually we need those things in order to hold us together.
There is so much freedom and structure, and a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, and I see it a lot in founders and entrepreneurs that get scared when you tell them about how much processes and structure there is, because they're usually people that like that freedom and flexibility, like I do. But what they don't realize is if you set that, if you define basically these things within that, then you have so much freedom. There's so much movement possible. But that's so counterintuitive that a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I always wonder as well, Natasha, was there ever a moment that felt like a litmus test for you? Because I feel like with some of the organizations that I work with, there's a little bit of like a sway point where it's
Mm.
like they kind of reach that moment of, oh, this is a real test of the system, of the way we're working, of either we're going to swing back to how things were, or we're going to kind of knuckle down and kind of keep with this, where the journey that we're on. Was there kind of like a moment for you guys like that where you just thought, oh, is this going to continue, or do we need to reassess?
Yeah, I'm not sure there was I mean, I think it was continuous. I wouldn't even call it necessarily litmus test, but there were, I mean, the first 2 years were very, very, very hard for me personally. I mean, those 2 years, I probably personally grew like a normal person would be in 20 years, and as you might know, growth hurts. Yeah, I had a lot of growing pains. So there were two of the most intensive years of my life. Um, and there were I had continuous doubts. Yeah, am I doing the right thing? Should we have even done this? So many people have failed. What says that we're going to succeed? We've done all these things and people still don't get it. I'm doing all these things and feeling I'm doing all this for people and they still are complaining and unhappy. And on the contrary, the more I feel like I'm doing for them, the more people were dissatisfied. I mean, you know, it was basically shit at the beginning, putting it very bluntly. Um, what led us to continue with it? It was those little successes. And there were always these little moments where suddenly somebody got it, or somebody, was blossoming and taking on, responsibility and doing something and taking a risk, or, I mean, I always say this one person in the team that, I mean, she was so quiet. She was always at her desk doing her thing. Yeah, basically, she was a very discreet role because just from the nature of her role. And she blossomed so much. Yeah, so she started like voicing everything and changing things and changing structures and things. And I was just like, wow, if this is possible within her, I mean, imagine if everybody was like her, like this company would be the most amazing place in the world. And it was those little moments, yeah, where somebody suddenly blossomed, got it, and where I said, wow, that was worth it just for this one change, for this one person. Let's carry on with the hope that we can do that with a second person, and then a third, and then a fourth, and it happened, and eventually I always talk about the 2 years because for me it's not the 2 years were were terrible, but
Mm,
after 2 years we hit what I like to call the tipping point,
mm,
where more than half of the people got it and were being self-led, yeah, and where it suddenly felt like it's not Natacha and just a few carrying the weight of everybody else. Yeah, this was this hard work. It felt like, okay, I can sit back a little bit because everybody, or at least, the majority of people are there to lift up the ones that haven't got it yet, that are helping them, that are bringing them also up to that level. It was a self-reinforcing system. And yeah, it wasn't at the beginning. At the beginning, it needed the extra power, and the tipping point reached, yeah, after 2 years. I don't think it always needs to be 2 years. I think yeah, we didn't have an external coach. We did everything alone. So there was a lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes. I mean, I did so many mistakes. I need to, I needed to develop myself in an early phase before I could even be a role model to other people. And then, so it took 2 years. By some companies, it might take 6 months. By other companies, it might take 6 years. I don't think there's a certain amount of time that it takes. But for us, the magic time was 2 years, and then we reached that tipping point, and that's where it was for me clear. I don't say we've reached where we wanted to go, because you never reach where you want to go. It's a continuous process. It's continuous improvement. But we were above the hill.
Oh my gosh, that story just gave me goosebumps, Natasha. Honestly, I was like, oh my gosh, that's just, yeah, so powerful. And that's what I say so often when I speak to people in our community that are doing this work, because I think being able to share stories like that when things are hard, because like you said, it is a hard journey to go on. I don't think anyone can be under any illusion that this is some kind of like plug in and play, like, oh, you just switch one for the other and it's really simple. It's like you said, it takes a lot of deep work. It takes a lot of resilience to keep going when things are difficult, and to be inquisitive and curious. But I think the really important part is being able to share those moments as well, to kind of go, oh wow, this happened and this is the impact that it had. And being able to share those stories always just makes me feel so optimistic about the future of the world as well, to be honest.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of silver linings. And I think a lot of the people that say it doesn't work, it's looking a lot of people that look a lot of the processes and the structure and the tools. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a little bit of a problem at the moment, because everybody talks about agile and scrum and holacracy and all these things, new work and all these buzzwords. And exactly, they think it's this plug and play, it's systems, and you just follow these steps and it will work. And if you ask me, all these things are supports. Yeah, they help, but they're not the fundamental work that needs to be done. The fundamental work is developing oneself and developing the team. Yeah, teaching people it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to make risks. You can dare to take your responsibility and make a and take a big decision. Yeah, even if it doesn't go well, you can dare to give somebody constructive feedback. On the contrary, it's good. They will learn from it and they will grow, and we will grow as a team. So all these things that are around the process and structures are, they're, if you have the picture of the iceberg, it's everything that's underneath. It's that 90% of the real work. All these structures and tools, they're only that little bit sticking out of the top that, that yeah, they're nice, and that's what you get to see. And that's why it helps at the beginning, because otherwise at the beginning people don't get to see the rest. Yeah, it's all fluffy stuff that a lot of people won't even understand. So it's good to have those support system, but it's not the most important. The most important is all the inner work or the developmental work that the team needs. And that often gets left out. That often gets forgotten, because that's the real work. The rest is easy. Anybody can implement a new structure and a few processes. That's the no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you're kind of giving us some of the kind of like what you would say to others starting on this journey. But I am really intrigued, Natasha. If a startup founder was to say to you like, "Oh, we're growing, and I'm thinking about doing self-management," what would your kind of words of wisdom be to them? What would you kind of say to them?
I would say amazing, firstly, because I think that's the best way to lead a company. Yeah, it's the most sustainable way as well. I think my words of wisdom would be, well, you need to make sure that you know what's coming. Yeah, so develop yourself, have the energy. Yeah, sometimes I have founders that come to me and say, you know, all the problems end up on my table. The team is not doing what they need to be doing, blah, blah, blah. And they're already so low in energy. The founder's close to burnout, that I'm not sure at that stage it was necessarily recommended, because it is, you need to have the energy to go into to this. So do it earlier rather than later, because if you do it too late, you're already going to be, too far gone to be able to put the work in and the energy in, which it needs. So rather earlier than, don't wait till you're burnt out and everybody else in the company is burnt out to do it. And I'd say, really, I mean, for me, the fundamental thing is the key. The fundamental key is trusting. Yeah, and it's trusting oneself to be able to do it, trusting others, that they will be able to. I mean, that's often a problem. Yeah, founders don't trust that anybody can take as good a decision as they can, or take care of their baby, their company as good as they can. So really learning to trust others, and to a certain extent trusting what comes. Yeah, it's not just a trust of oneself and of others. It's also trusting the process. Yeah, that that it will develop in the way that it needs to develop, and that's good for the company and oneself. And yeah, that's also an easy word to say that everybody will, whoever's listening in will say, yeah, trust. Okay, check, good. But it's hard work to really learn to trust. Yeah, the first person is harder. The hardest person to learn to trust is yourself, obviously. But that's hard work. Yeah, it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Natacha, for coming on and sharing your journey. And oh my gosh, I feel like I've got so many things that I still want to ask you, but there's just never enough time. And you've just given us so much wisdom and insight into this journey. And yeah, just thank you so much for sharing so much with us.
You're so welcome. And as you might have noticed, I mean, this has become my new passion, my new purpose, because I think it's the greatest impact. If we manage to make more self-managed companies, we can change the world in a better way. Yeah, that everybody, when you're self-led, you make better decisions for yourself, for others, and for the world. And so it's what I know, and it's what I'm passionate about, and it's now my way of having this positive impact. Maybe it's a nice way to finish off, because we start like that. Thank you so much, Lizzie.
Thank you so much, Natacha, and amen to that. More self-managed companies, here we come.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.